Welcome back to my channel. What you should have said was the channel where we talk all about having tough conversations with friends, family members, coworkers, lovers, and anyone else who happens to be important to us. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The quality of our lives is determined largely by the quality of our relationships with others. So this channel is devoted to improving our relationships with those around us by having tough conversations. These are the high stakes conversations where we have to get real about our fears, our needs, our goals, our desires. That's what this is all about. And today we're talking about the relationships between adult children and parents. And we're going to have our very first, what you should have said was, case study. So stay tuned. So let's get into it. Today we're talking about boundaries. And boundaries, like authenticity, I covered authenticity in my last video, is another one of those kind of sticky terms. A lot of people react negatively because it sounds very academic. It sounds like something you would read in a self-help book. It sounds like something you would find in a textbook maybe. It sounds very clinical, and it doesn't sound like it can really apply to our lives. And today we're actually talking about how boundaries apply to our relationships with our parents when we're adults. So because boundary as a term can be a bit confusing and off-putting, for our purposes, let's just define it as what other people can and cannot do to, with, or for us. Simply put, boundaries are really about what it's okay to do and what it's not okay to do. So our sense of what it is and is not okay for others to do with and to us develops all throughout our life, but the very first place that we learn about these things is in the home. Our parents actually are the first people to model boundaries to us. One way that they do this, one example of a boundary, is physical, personal space. So we all know families that are extremely physically affectionate. They might cuddle on the couch. If someone is distressed, they might give them a hug. They might kiss hello. Maybe you might see the parents kissing, things like that. And conversely, there are families that don't really show a lot of physical affection. Perhaps they might keep a bit of a distance. They might not hug their children, or the parents might not express physical affection. They might do like a cordial handshake, on your birthday once a year, but that's about it for physical affection. And it's important to state that both ways of interacting are absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with either. It's just that different families have different boundaries, different standards for what is okay and not okay to do with each other physically. So as we grow up and we start to become individuals and not just members of our family, our boundaries shift and change. So even though you might have grown up in one of these cordial handshake type of families, you might find that as you grow and develop, and as you start to socialize with other people, you might discover, hey, actually, I'd really like to express my affection physically. Maybe I might try kissing someone hello. That's perfectly okay too. Of course, at that point, you have to check in with that person that you want to kiss hello, if that's okay with them. So you have to check in about other people's boundaries before you're able to do that. That's essentially what consent is all about, checking to see if your actions are consistent with another person's boundaries. So what happens when our boundaries conflict with those of our parents when we're adults? Well, I would say that that's a perfectly good time to have a tough conversation. So let's go over a case study. This is actually something someone wrote to me. I'll actually read it out loud. Awkward family travel situation. I don't want to seem ungrateful and don't really know what to do. In 1 month, I'll be going out of state with my family. They have kindly booked a few activities for us to do, one of which is it's an animal activity. Not going to say which one. I was excited about this at first, but after doing some research, I found out that this is actually really unpleasant for the animals. So now I don't really want to do this activity or go to the place where the activity is held, but I don't think it'll be possible. No matter where you stand on this subject, what do you think is the best way to express this to people who would not understand my views? I want to say something to my parents about this, and I really don't want to participate, but I feel they would be offended since they already planned everything and they are paying my way. So, big matzo ball, lots of stuff in this story, so let's dig in. If you do end up talking about this to your parents and they really take the time to listen and try to understand your point of view, it might actually bring you guys even closer than you were before. Your relationship might actually improve as a result of bringing this issue up with them. Of course, there is the possibility that they might get offended, and we're going to talk about why that is. But the way that I see it, you have really two choices. You could bring this up and risk conflict, or you could try and keep the peace. A lot of people default to keeping the peace in this situation, and I feel like that option has really two downsides. The first is that most people overestimate how good of an actor they are. They think that they can hide their emotions expertly, and it's rarely the case. So even though you might think that you're doing a great job of keeping it on the inside and you haven't said anything, chances are your resentment, your lack of comfort will probably bubble up to the surface either during the activity, prior to the activity, or after the activity, and you not saying anything at all might taint the whole vacation. Remember, these are your parents. They raised you. They can probably read your micro expressions and they can pick up on your energy pretty well. It's not likely that you're going to hide anything. The second downside is what I mentioned before, is that in not bringing this up, you're actually missing out on an opportunity for your parents to get to know you on a deeper level. And that's the whole point of a family vacation anyways, is for you guys to work on your relationship, to make beautiful memories, and to ultimately be stronger as a family. So by keeping this to yourself, you're missing an opportunity to actually build your relationship in a good way. So one of the things that this person mentioned in their letter is the money issue. So I want to talk about that right now. This comes up a lot around boundary and consent kind of conversations. So let's do a thought experiment. Imagine that I invited you out for dinner and I said, it's my treat. Only when we got to the restaurant, I said that this is actually a bird-themed restaurant and I'm going to chew the food up in my mouth, and I'm just going to gently regurgitate the lukewarm food into your mouth like a little bird. Well, most people would be out of there so fast, it would not matter that I offered to pay. Me offering to pay does not nullify someone else's boundaries. And though this seems like a very exaggerated example, I think it's one that illustrates how we prioritize certain boundaries over others. So the boundary around physical space and hygiene seems obvious to most people, and most people feel quite entitled to that boundary, while this ethical boundary that this person mentioned with the animal activity seems like something that's so over the top, seems extravagant to a lot of people, when really it's not. It's just another kind of boundary. So the take-home lesson is this: you are entitled to your boundaries regardless of who is bankrolling whatever thing you're experiencing, whatever activity you're participating in. Now, that might be true, but your parents might still get offended. So let's talk about why that is. Well, first of all, like I said before, your parents are really the first people to teach you about boundaries and to model boundaries that they think are appropriate. So it might really surprise them when you've picked up a few new ones along the way. So being a parent means being a leader. For many people, parenthood is the defining role of their lives. It really changes the way they think about values and decisions, and they take great pride in passing along values and boundaries that they think are good. They derive a lot of their self-image from being the kind of people that model good boundaries for their children. So in imposing a boundary that didn't come from them, in a way they might interpret that as you questioning their ability and their skills as a parent. But while parents are leaders while children are growing up, that leader-follower relationship changes as kids get older, and it becomes more a relationship between equals. And it might change again when parents get older and perhaps infirm. They might require help and support from their adult children, and they might require their adult children to shift more into that leadership role to support them. That means that you, as an adult child, deserve to have your boundaries respected. But of course, in order for that to happen, you have to communicate about what your boundaries actually are. It's also important to mention that in order to respect each other's boundaries, you don't necessarily have to have the same ones. You can respect other people's boundaries while disagreeing with them. That's perfectly okay, but you still have to respect them. I also want to mention that while we're talking about why parents might get upset and what you might want to do in that case, it's important to entertain the idea that they might not get upset at all. So sometimes when we're contemplating having a tough conversation with someone, we visualize the situation getting out of hand. We visualize these over-the-top reactions from the people around us that actually might not happen at all. We often talk ourselves out of having tough conversations, and in doing so, we actually don't give ourselves the chance to be surprised by someone's kindness, compassion, and generosity. Essentially, we don't give people the chance to rise to the occasion. So your parents might well have planned this trip in order so that they can spend more time with you, get to know you, and give you the chance to relax without putting the burden of worrying about finances on you. Knowing that you're uncomfortable with this experience is something they'd really like to know about because they want you to be comfortable. They want you to be at ease, and they want to make great family memories. And that's not going to be possible if you're uncomfortable. They might feel grateful that you've shared this boundary with them, and it might even prompt a deeper discussion about values that you would have otherwise not had if you didn't say anything at all. So, without further ado, what you should have said was, "Mom, Dad, thanks so much for planning this trip, and thanks for paying my way. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to spending time with you. I'm looking forward to making great memories together, and I'm really stoked about it. I really appreciate you taking the time to plan activities for us to do. I know it's not easy. It's very time consuming because, we all have different preferences. About the animal activity that you planned, I'm actually not comfortable with it. So I was excited at first, but I did some research and I found out that actually the animals involved in those activities suffer, and that's not consistent with my values. I really don't feel comfortable doing this, and I'm not going to participate. I'm happy to circle back with you after the activity is done, and I certainly don't expect you guys not to go and participate on it on my account. I'm happy to circle back with you after the activity is done, and I'm happy to reimburse you for any deposits and payments that have already been made. And again, I don't expect you not to participate. It's just that this particular activity is just not something that's consistent with my values. Thanks for understanding. I really appreciate you planning this. This was really hard for me to bring up with you because I want you to know how appreciative I am of your time and effort and the money that you're putting towards this trip so that we can all have a great time. I really am looking forward to it, and I didn't want you to think otherwise. So there you have it. You get to have boundaries with your parents and still treat them respectfully. You still can express gratitude and still stand up for your boundaries. In fact, doing so might make your relationship better. You never know. If it doesn't, you'll know kind of why that might be. And again, that doesn't have anything to do with your boundaries as much as it does with how your parents think of themselves still as leaders and their reluctance to transition into a more egalitarian relationship. Telling people your boundaries, sharing your boundaries with others, enforcing your boundaries with others is actually one of the most kind and loving things that you can do. It's a way that you teach others to love you and respect you and be in communion with you in a harmonious way. Thanks for watching, and I hope that was helpful. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care.